There is a strange and unsettling silence that falls over us after we scroll away from the feed. It's not the peaceful silence of nature, but the heavy, expectant silence of an empty stage after the performance is over. We live in the era of the digital echo, where every sunrise, every meal, and every small victory must prove its existence to a collective audience. Yet, you know someone, perhaps you are someone, who refuses to participate in this grand, constant audition. They move quietly through the noise. They observe deeply. They absorb the world without ever feeling the need to project it back. And the question that always lingers in the mind of the performer is, why would anyone choose to remain unseen when visibility is the default currency of value? We often resort to the easy, shallow answers. We assume they are simply shy, or aloof, or technologically inept. But that assumption is profoundly incomplete. Beneath the surface of their quiet retreat lies an entire psychology that speaks volumes about modern exhaustion, the fatigue of the soul. They are not defined by what they lack, but by what they are desperately trying to protect. What they are protecting is not their privacy in the traditional sense. It is their emotional capacity. For many, the decision to stop posting is a slow, quiet surrender to the fact that they no longer knew how to feel pure, unconditioned joy. They had reached a point of profound anhedonia, a deep inability to experience pleasure, not because they were depressed, though the line is often blurred, but because their entire system of reward had been outsourced. Think of it. When you pick up a beautiful coffee cup, your immediate thought is no longer, how does this feel in my hand, but what is the best angle, the right filter, the perfect caption? That subtle shift is the moment the true experience dies and the performance begins. We have trained ourselves to experience life for the lens, not for the self. When you realize that your most beautiful moments feel hollow, sterile, or mandatory because they exist primarily to serve the algorithm, that is when the quiet collapse begins. You become exhausted not just by the scrolling, but by the relentless, invisible, self-presentational pressure. It's the constant, low-level dread that your life is being judged, weighed, and compared, even if you never click share. You are constantly preparing for the role, and that preparation drains the energy needed for living the actual scene. This emotional void, this anhedonia, is the core pain of the modern quiet person. They choose silence not out of strength, but out of necessity. They have to step away from the stage because the performance was eating away at the only thing they truly owned, their internal, unfiltered emotional world. They are not antisocial, they are anti-performance. And in a world that demands a constant, visible output of happiness and productivity, refusing to perform is the ultimate act of self-preservation. It is a necessary withdrawal to prevent a total emotional shutdown. I wonder, what is the value of a perfect sunset if you can only experience it through the filter of a future caption? The quiet ones are those who decided the filter was too expensive. Imagine a museum of exquisite moments, a quiet space, perhaps dimly lit with soft, ambient light filtering through high windows in Portland, where I live. This museum houses the things that truly defined us, the deep, breathless laughter shared across a kitchen table, the sudden, sharp grief of a loss, the quiet triumph of finishing a difficult task at 3 a.m. Before the digital age, these moments were stored in an archive room, a private internal space bound by memory, warmth, and the smell of old paper. They were ours. They were sacred because they were untouchable. Then the age of display arrived. The social feed became the new public gallery. We were told that to exist, our moments had to be moved from the private archive room to the public gallery, and as soon as they entered the light, they were subjected to analysis, to likes, to interpretation, and to indifference. The intimacy of the moment was lost the instant it was labeled, cropped, and optimized for consumption. The people who stopped posting are the ones who realized that every time they shared something beautiful, they felt an invisible pressure to keep outdoing it. They realized they weren't preserving the moment. They were merely tokenizing it. They were stripping it of its inherent value and exchanging it for the temporary, shallow currency of external validation. This realization creates the phenomenon I call the digital phantom limb. Even after they step back, after they delete the apps and find silence, they feel a subtle, unsettling emptiness. It's the phantom sensation of the appendage that is no longer there, the social media profile, the audience, the dopamine loop. Their brain, trained over a decade of quick rewards, still expects the tingle of a notification, the warmth of external approval. This phantom limb sensation is the hollow feeling that accompanies their retreat. It forces them to confront a terrifying question. If I did something meaningful and didn't feel the urge to share it, did I truly do it for myself? This internal confrontation is a difficult psychological space. It requires them to sit in the quiet of their own archive room, surrounded by memories that are now purely for their consumption, and begin the slow, arduous work of finding internal significance again. They have to teach their nervous system that a private smile holds more weight than 1,000 digital hearts. The quiet intensity of this internal struggle is what defines the psychology of the unseen. To truly understand this withdrawal, we must move past simple observations and look at the underlying neurochemistry. The silent person is often reacting to a system that has been hijacked, specifically the reward system. Our brains are masterful prediction engines. They rely on the release of dopamine, not as a chemical of pleasure itself, but as a chemical of motivation and learning. Dopamine is released when we anticipate a reward, guiding us toward beneficial actions. For millennia, this guided us toward food, water, and social bonding. In the digital era, we unintentionally retrained this ancient essential system. Every time you posted something, a moment, a thought, an opinion, and received immediate positive feedback, likes, comments, shares, your brain registered this as a massive, instantaneous, and highly reinforcing reward. This process created a powerful feedback loop: action, post, prediction, validation, dopamine spike. The critical issue lies in the contrast. When you experience true quiet joy, a slow cup of tea on a cold morning, a silent observation of the rain, the dopamine release is subtle, steady, and internal. Compared to the massive external spike delivered by digital validation, the internal joy becomes registered as an irrelevant signal. The brain, efficient and seeking the largest payoff, begins to deprioritize these quiet signals. It learns that true value is only found in the performative, public sphere. This leads to Reward System Shutdown, specifically concerning intrinsic pleasure. You are not lacking the will to enjoy things. You are experiencing a functional disorder where your brain's internal measurement tool for subtle joy is dulled. The result is the anhedonia we discussed earlier. The joy is physically present, but the neurological system required to register it as important has gone quiet. The quiet ones are attempting a spontaneous, often unconscious neurochemical detox. By physically and mentally stepping away, they are starving the system of the massive external reward spikes. This is why the first phase of withdrawal feels so empty. They feel the absence of the loud dopamine spike, and the subtle internal signals of genuine life satisfaction haven't yet regained enough volume to be heard. It takes discipline and time to reverse a decade of conditioning. They are patiently waiting for their brain to remember that quiet, private life can be, and must be, its own sufficient reward. The withdrawal of people who don't post is a profound reaction against a controlled form of psychology, the loss of ownership. In psychology, psychological ownership is the feeling that an object, an idea, or in this case, an experience, wholly belongs to you. It provides a sense of control, autonomy, and forms the foundation of personal identity. When we digitize a moment, turning it from a feeling into data, we unintentionally transfer ownership. Consider a very specific example. You're hiking alone in the Cascade Range. You see a still, perfect lake. It's a moment where serenity touches you. If you share that photo, you immediately open the door to a multitude of possibilities. It gets compared to someone else's prettier photo. It gets misinterpreted. You must be so lonely hiking alone. It becomes an object for public consumption, a tourist spot, a news headline. By posting it, you've transformed a deeply internal moment into a temporary public asset. The pain begins here. You have lost ownership of your original emotion. The joy is instantly devalued, contaminated by the need for public maintenance and validation. Silent people understand that to preserve the integrity of an experience, they must let it die to the world. They accept that invisibility is the best protective barrier. They are the last ones still fighting to preserve the inviolability of inner life. This invisibility is not a sign of insecurity, but evidence of a powerful internal locus of control trying to recover. They've realized that placing their self-worth or their joy into the hands of the public is a risky and unsustainable life strategy. Control does not lie in managing how they are perceived, but in completely governing what is kept within. Withdrawal is an act of declaration. My value is not a public poll. It is a form of psychological resistance, where the refusal to perform becomes the strongest statement of autonomy. We must approach the quiet life not as a virtue, but as a necessary and often painful form of self-preservation. This is where we uncover the concept I call the shadow cost of congruence. Those who stop posting are trying to maintain congruence, the alignment between who they are internally and who they present externally. But this alignment comes with a profound, often overlooked price tag. The price is the weight of being unseen. When you refuse to present a curated version of yourself, you are denying the world the easy, digestible narrative it expects. You are essentially telling society, I am too complex to be reduced to a highlight reel, and you must accept me in my entirety, or not at all. This choice guarantees two things: true intimacy with a few and systemic misunderstanding from the many. The shadow cost lies in the fact that your decision to maintain inner truth often leads to external isolation. People will label you mysterious, detached, or even cold. They will assume the silence is an empty space when, ironically, it is often an archive room overflowing with unprocessed grief, growth, and observation. The deepest insight here is that invisibility is not the goal, it is the battlefield. The person who retreats is not doing so from a place of immediate peace. They are retreating to engage in the silent work of defining their value without external mirrors. This is an exhausting process because the nervous system, addicted to the external validation, interprets the silence as a threat, as proof that you are, perhaps, falling behind while others are performing progress. Their journey is about learning to recognize that the most defining moments of their lives, the deep reckonings, the quiet breakthroughs in understanding, happened in the dark. They are not recorded, they are not commented upon, and they are not applauded. The quiet intensity of this work is the true measure of their strength. They have accepted the heaviest truth of the digital age. You have to choose between being validated and being real. And they chose the messy, unfiltered, unrecorded reality. That choice, while liberating, is also profoundly lonely until the internal locus of control is fully rebuilt. The refusal to post is not simply a lifestyle choice. It is a manifestation of an ongoing crisis in identity formation. Identity used to be a process of internal negotiation, shaped by close relationships, work, and reflection. Today, it is an exercise in public curation. As the cognitive psychologist Erik Erikson taught us, identity formation involves an ego negotiation, a continuous striving for self-definition. When social media becomes the primary feedback mechanism, our identity ceases to be a truth to be discovered and becomes a product to be marketed. Those who withdraw are enacting a necessary rebellion against this productization of the self. They realize that living for content fragments the person. Every day requires an act of self-editing, removing the inconvenient truths, amplifying the aesthetically pleasing moments, and filtering the vulnerability. This constant fragmentation is devastating to the ego, leading to a profound identity confusion. You start to lose track of who you are when the filter is off. The quiet person's mission, therefore, becomes one of radical reintegration. They are seeking to make whole the fractured self. They understand that the moments that truly shape your character, the hours spent sitting alone with grief, the slow, unseen work of learning patience, the private victories over deeply ingrained habits, these are non-shareable events. They are too messy, too long, too internal for the feed. By rejecting the feed, they create a sanctuary for these non-shareable events. They are attempting to reestablish the biological and psychological primacy of the unwitnessed moment. Think of the difference between writing a journal and writing a post. A journal is written for integration, to make sense of the inner chaos. A post is written for disintegration, to break down complexity into consumable affirmation. The unposted life is a commitment to journaling over posting. It's a decision to prioritize integration, even if it means sacrificing recognition. This shift naturally cultivates a stronger internal locus of control. Their worth is no longer a fluctuating stock price dependent on daily market sentiment. likes, and comments. Their worth becomes the stable, underlying commodity, defined only by their own congruence, effort, and moral compass. This is the profound, quiet victory of the unseen. They stop needing the digital echo of "you are enough" because they have finally started to believe it themselves. The realization that you've been living for the performance can feel like waking up to a profound emptiness. But this void is not a sign of failure. It is the necessary ground clearing before you can rebuild. Recovery from the reward system. Shutdown is not about willpower. It's about re-education. It's about patiently teaching your brain that the internal signal matters again. If you find yourself in this quiet space, don't look for immediate peace. Look for certainty. I offer 3 points of gentle guidance, not as motivational cliches, but as slow, deliberate acts of the cognitive retraining. 1. Practice non-content-worthy activities, NCWAs. Dedicate specific time each day, say 20 minutes, to activities that are inherently unshareable. Do something messy, quiet, or boring. Read a book without highlighting passages to quote later. Cook a meal and immediately wipe the lens of your mind clean of any desire to photograph it. Take a walk and focus on the smell of pine and damp earth, not on finding a good shot. The purpose of the NCWA is to create an emotional transaction without an audience. The reward must be contained entirely within the experience. Do this not because you want to feel better, but to create a measurable, non-public data point for your brain. This activity provided sufficient value, and no external validation was required. This is the slow accumulation of evidence that begins to turn up the volume on your internal signals. 2. Name the echo of the freeze. When you feel that familiar urge, that rush of anxiety, or that hollow craving to check the feed or prove your worth, don't label it loneliness or weakness. Label it the echo of the freeze. Recognize it for what it is, the residual activity of an overconditioned nervous system. It's the digital phantom limb tingling. By naming it scientifically and neutrally, you transition the feeling from a personal failure into a manageable signal. You detach your identity from the symptom. You learn to observe the urge without obeying it, and in that space between the urge and the action, you cultivate true freedom. 3. Seek limited, high definition. Connection. The quiet life does not mean isolation. It means prioritizing density over volume in your relationships. You do not need everyone to see you. You need a few people to see you correctly. True connection in this era is signaled by the people who check in on you without a required update from your side. They are the ones who remember your small stories without being prompted by an algorithm. Invest your emotional energy there. The ability to be silent, vulnerable, and completely unfiltered with 1 or 2 people is a greater measure of psychological wealth than any number of followers. It is in this high-definition space that your silence is accepted as a part of your truth, not a puzzle to be solved. This is how you rebuild the certainty that your value is constant, even when unseen. This work is quiet, slow, and unapplauded, but it is the only way back to genuine self-trust. The quiet people, those who choose the unposted life, are often the ones who hold the mirror up to the rest of us. They remind us that the most profound forms of human existence are found in the things that cannot and should not be measured. We spent years confusing visibility with value. We assume that to matter, we must be noticed. But real meaning doesn't need witnesses. Some of the most significant shifts in your character, the way you process deep grief, the small, unnoticed acts of quiet kindness, the decision to forgive something unforgivable, happen in the solitude of your own archive room. They happen in the silence between the posts. The truth is, things that shape you most rarely make it to the feed. They live in memory, in the texture of your quiet confidence, and in the strength of your internal locus of control. This quiet intensity, this commitment to the unfiltered self, is not a flawless path. There will be moments of doubt, of wondering if you are falling behind. But with time, the realization sets in. Your worth doesn't disappear when nobody is looking. It is still there, steady, like the deep hum of a quiet room after the storm has passed. Ultimately, the choice to live an unposted life is a decision to prioritize being a person over being a performance. It is a recognition that our narratives are richer, our emotions are deeper, and our connections are warmer when they are raw, unbroadcasted, and fiercely protected. In a world so desperate to be seen, their silence is not an emptiness. It is a full statement. It is a homecoming to the self. And perhaps that is the deepest, most quiet form of freedom available to us today.